everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you all for tuning in. I am very excited about my two guests this week. One, because they are very dear, dear friends of mine, and two, because of the topic that we're going to be covering. And we are going to be listening today to two teachers and what their experience was like, and the grief and the recovery from COVID. I have heard of so many stories from COVID from the frontline health professionals and people in the hospitality space. And but really, I have not seen a lot of interviews or heard some of the ramifications that our teachers experienced. I've even heard more about what this experience has been like for students and parents. So today we are going to sink into a conversation with Julie and Candy, who have been teachers for many years. So I'm going to have each of them actually introduce themselves. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Julie. So why don't you start and give us your background?
Thanks, Susan, for having us. It is like you're in the space that Candy and I have been in for, well, we were college roommates. And so we've been friends and teacher friends for a very long time. So I started my teaching career in Sydney, Maine, and I taught kindergarten and second grade while I was there. I then taught in Winslow, Maine, and I taught fourth grade, second grade, and kindergarten, and ended my career in Falmouth, Maine. And in Falmouth, I taught second and first grade, and I recently retired as of June.
Congratulations. And we will
Thank
get into
you.
that. Candy.
Yes, I'm Candy Allen, and I started my teaching career in New Gloucester, and I taught second grade there for 10 years. I spent the next 7 years at home with our boys. Next, I went to Wyndham as a Title I reading ed tech for 5 years. And then in 2005, I was hired as a second grade teacher in Cumberland. So I taught second and third grade there for 16 years. And in the spring of 2021, I retired after 32 years of teaching.
Yes, and I know, because I do know you both, that COVID helped to push you into early retirement, which I think has pushed a lot of people into early retirement in various vocations that we will get into. But the focus of our conversation today and what we're going to be talking about is the trauma, the grief and trauma of what teachers experienced. And as I said earlier, I know, of course, there were huge consequences for students and parents, but if we were to tackle all three of those areas, we could be sitting here for several hours. So where I'd like to start framing our conversation is, can you give me and our listeners the top five challenging, or the top five traumatic events that you experienced when you were dealing with this global pandemic as educators? And again, reminding everybody that you were working with the little guys. So I don't know. I mean, I want this to be fluid. So please, anyone who would like to start, you can, add to each other's commentary, whatever feels comfortable for you.
Great, thanks. Candy and I were talking, and we've been talking for years about this, of course. What we thought it was going to be a 2-week hiatus from our classrooms at the beginning of this pandemic. Administration said be prepared to be out at least 2 weeks, and that 2 weeks turned into years of teaching differently.
And how, Julie, 2 years, 3 years? I'm trying to think in my mind.
So it began in March of 2020, and we left our schools with supplies to teach for 2 weeks, knowing that we wouldn't be going back into our schools. And my school didn't reopen for teachers to get in there again until June. And so it was after school was over, we went back into our dead plants, dead fish, and all of that.
It's not funny, but you're making me laugh.
Well, no, and the room as you left it, months ago. So that was a very different situation. And so, Candy, when you left your classroom.
Oh, I know. When I went back, I went, oh, there's my St. Patrick's Day decoration still up. And it was a very eerie feeling to walk back in.
Well, and Julie, I mean, I know I started to laugh, but when you said the dead plants and dead fish, it's sort of, I mean, talk about how, I don't know if I want to use the word prophetic, but just the death that surrounded us during COVID. And as you said, Candy, how eerie it is because the whole world shut down and it did feel apocalyptic at times. I mean, it really did. I think all of us on a daily basis were just, what is going to happen today? Is our world going to end? It was very, very scary. So please keep going.
Yeah. For me, I know a challenge was the technology. It is not a strength I have, but it was a crash course in many different platforms and ways to communicate. And fortunately, I had some wonderful colleagues to help, but every day was a struggle with the technology for me.
Candy and I started our careers with manual typewriters, a chalkboard, chalk, and the purple mimeograph copy machines. So, and we were pretty good with all of that. And, I ended my career after 39 years. And the last 3, I taught a year longer than Candy. And she was a great support to me. But I have to say that jealousy reared its ugly head when she would send me you can do this. And I was like, I'm not sure I can text. So the technology in itself, Candy and I would talk on the phone often, and thank goodness for our young colleagues who were able to talk us through and show us from home to home, because we weren't in person, how to get onto these different platforms that would help our children learn. So we had a Seesaw app, which was an app where we could send our children, each child, a lesson, and then they could respond and it would record them. And they could draw, they could write, they could record. And so at that point, that was our way of teaching and learning and assessing with them. And so the various platforms, and there were many, addressed curriculum as best we could when you're looking at a whole group of children, a grade level, because our teams work together. And the hard part was not being able to individualize education and differentiate, which is what we do.
I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this ad. Hey guys, I want to take a minute to offer an opportunity for those of you who've been searching for a mental health therapist and haven't had any luck getting callbacks. I know it's challenging to find help, so I've partnered with BetterHelp. They are the world's largest therapy service, and they are 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you'd expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility at a more affordable price. Get 10% off right now on your first month at betterhelp.com/rock your shine. That's betterhelp.com/ rock your shine. Now, back to our episode.
So
let's talk about the other. I mean, I have had the deep honor of talking to the two of you, which is where this story which was the impetus for this story, really hearing that grief in your voices when we were talking about your experiences. I'm going to just list a few things because I really want to pause in the technology part, because I think that the technology was not only a challenge and a barrier, but really created a lot of anxiety, not just for you, but also for the students. So just a few things that I had jotted down when I've talked to you is some of the deep challenges was the technology, which we are going to talk more about, but managing your own anxiety while you're trying to keep the children engaged, cleaning the classroom, right? When the kids came back and you were doing the hybrid model. I know that, Julie, in your school, you had half your class in the morning and then you had the other in the afternoon. And Candy, you had a hybrid model where the kids would come a couple of days and then, the other half would come. So you each had your own all the schools had these different models, but all of them, of course, were so taxing. But and I think also something that you guys had talked about were the little ones having to go to the bathroom on their own. These kids couldn't eat together. They're kids, and then the kids' anxiety where they were like, "Get out of my space." So you had mentioned all of these things that I hadn't even really thought about. But the technology, as somebody who has worked remotely for 23 years, when COVID hit, it did not change my work at all. It was seamless. But for the majority of my friends, and certainly teachers, it was almost like push the panic button. Like, what the hell are we supposed to do? What I would like to take a few minutes and really hear from you is so that our listeners get a much better understanding of what that tsunami looked like for you. You got the thing like, hey guys, you're going to be out for 2 weeks. We all got that, right? We're on lockdown for 2 weeks, and suddenly it was an indefinite period of time. What did that transition from school to home look like?
Well, I lived alone at the time. And so I am a visual learner. And so to have nobody that I could have show me unless they went through the computer, which is what they did. I'm fortunate enough to have many teacher friends, Candy being the person who I talk to most of the time. And my son is also in education. And so he would say, Mom, it's going to be okay, not even knowing if it was going to, because Candy and I had spoken about how inept we felt for the first time. Here I had 39 years teaching, ended with 39 years. Candy ends with 32. And
I know, I felt like here I was, a veteran teacher, and there were so many times that I could cry because I felt really stupid. I felt like a first year teacher because it was so foreign how we were doing it. And I feel like my greatest sadness and grief came from, I can't teach the way I believe I want to teach, and my philosophy about, early elementary education. I always worked in small groups. I always hugged them. There were lots of smiles, and everything was so sort of antiseptic. And both Julie and I talked about how when the kids have a mask, and we did too, there's a whole lot that's missed in communication. Socially, can we really read how they're feeling?
But this, sorry, Candy, just to interrupt, but this is when the students came back, right?
Yes.
So let's just for a moment, because I want to get to that, but I want to pause at how long was it? Only 2 weeks before how long before you guys did a hybrid kind of model? How long were you actually out of the classroom?
it was September of 2020, August of 2020, when we went back into the classroom with the hybrid model. So we were out of the classroom for the end of the school year for 2020.
So Did you go back in April and my district didn't?
No, that was the next year.
The next year.
The next year.
So you were out total for how long? Sorry, I'm not doing the math.
March to June.
Okay, so that was a decent amount of time. And then you had the summer, because we know now, right? The summer was all about what the hell you guys were going to do in September. So in that period of time, how much grace were the teachers given between leaving, telling you guys that you were going to be gone for, so many weeks or months or whatever? Did you have time with the teachers? Was there time to learn the technology or the platforms that you were going to use? I'm trying to wrap my mind around how you leave a classroom, you're told you can't come back, and all of a sudden you have got to figure out how to teach these children, and you don't have a clue how to use it, but also thinking about how to teach in an entirely different way from what you've always done. Those are two different things in my mind.
We met a lot just through Zoom with like team meetings. And
okay.
Then
were you getting taught? Were you getting videos? Like, how were you even taught how to use Zoom?
It was all done through technology. And I'll tell you, there were times like I was so fearful because there would be a glitch in the technology and how do I get back on? So it wasn't just like your team meeting. You had like school-wide meetings and it's all on Zoom. And our tech departments, boy, they worked hard. I so appreciate their work. But in some ways it was like, flying the plane while you're building it kind of thing.
We were in a constant state of fight or flight. I know that the two of us were. And so, so many teachers throughout the state and beyond, because we have teacher friends teaching in other states, of course, the whole idea of this changing the way you present information, we still had to talk about how to assess. How do we make sure that these children are getting what they need? But it was all through technology and things for those people who knew how to share a page, click on something. I would be on a meeting and my co-teacher would be with me on my phone. I would say, how do I get to this? She would text it to me. I would try to share my questions with other teammates privately, but I felt, well, Candy and I have used the word stupid. We felt stupid, and it's not a good feeling when we are used to being the people who, are typically in the know and very comfortable being in the know.
Along with us learning this, we also had to figure out how are we going to teach the children how to navigate this platform. So it wasn't just our learning. A lot of those kids, we had to teach them how to do it too.
So, I mean, just so that we really all get the true picture of what is going on here, you're having to learn new technology. You're having to think about how do you go from a classroom in-person setting to online teaching. They're two totally different things. I know, because I've been a trainer online for many years. They are so vastly different in terms of what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, what you're doing. And now we've got little kids that also need to learn the technology. I mean, it is amazing to me that schools didn't shut down completely. I'm so in awe of how you were able to manage it all. But I think what you're talking about right now is feeling like that babe in the woods. Like it's here you are, these seasoned professionals who can teach in your sleep, to feeling brand new and not having a clue what you're doing or how you're going to do it. And so what I'd like to, if it's okay with the two of you to go here, is sort of that underbelly, kind of the ugly of what that looks like emotionally, of what was happening for, see that I'm getting emotional already, sort of that underbelly of, you got to put on the face. You're the teacher. You are the leader. You are the guide. You're the ones who provide comfort, not just for the children, but also for these parents that are all equally at a loss and panicked.
Yeah.
How did you nurture yourself? And it's okay if you didn't, but I want to go down this path. How did you nurture yourself, manage your own panic? What did your mental health look like through this global pandemic of fear and anxiety?
Well, I did learn to become my own bartender, which which isn't good, but living by myself, they say don't drink alone. I'm all I had. And so Candy and I would pour a glass of wine, and we wouldn't Zoom because Zoom brought such fear that we would just talk on the phone. Hit the speaker button and just chat. And so that was like a lifeline for me, and talking to my family. But unless you worked in a school, I think it was really hard for people to relate to how it was like a Rube Goldberg machine gone bad, right? Because everything that you had to do affected so many other steps. I was exhausted physically and mentally. The hours that we worked, and many of my hours were spent trying to figure out how to present information to first graders so that they could understand and be learners for at least a bit. And so that was painful at times. And so waking up at 5 and trying to get my best hours in before I really daylight came. And Candy and I talked about this, and working late into the night, correcting the work that the kids were sending us through this visual platform called Seesaw.
Yeah, and I would agree with Julie. I just always felt exhausted and on edge. And I mean, fortunate I have a wonderful husband at home that I came home to, who was a retired teacher, who was like, I can't believe you're doing this. But as we've said, we really relied on each other because we really understood what each was going through. We got a puppy, and she was very good for my mental health. That was such a wonderful distraction and a way for me to get that nurturing and the touch and all of that. But it was all the time just digging deep to know that those kids are looking to me. So I've got to be positive. We tried to put some fun into the classroom. I was telling Julie about the Mandalorian was really popular at this time. So I bought a little stuffed animal of Baby Yoda, and he sat on a stool right behind my desk. And it was the first thing that I saw in the morning. It was the first thing that the kids did, and kind of became our little classroom mascot. We did some drawing activities, and you just have to, I just had to keep reminding myself, they're looking to me for consistency, a caring, nurturing classroom that has as much routine as we can, but they're looking to me as a person who has fun too and makes learning fun.
That's, of course, trying to provide some levity in such a dark time, I think is some of the most important things that any of us could do, because there was time when it got so insane that, I always call it, there's a tipping point with insanity where it gets so crazy that it becomes funny because it's so outrageous. You think that you're living in some sort of alter reality, like people scrubbing their food after they go shopping with wipes. One day I was doing that. I'm like, this is actually insane. I said to myself, I'm like, I think this might be more insane than what is happening in the world. And I'm like, if I die from getting the pandemic from not wiping down this package of lettuce, then so be it. I mean, I would literally like observe myself thinking, you're crazy. I think you might actually be crazy. And so I'm curious in this, and Julie, I loved what you said, becoming your own bartender, because I think that was very true for many of us. I mean, it is a known fact that the alcohol sales went through the roof during the pandemic, and also tater tot sales. Everyone sort of like started to buy their own comfort food. For me, it was tater tots. I hadn't had a tater tot since I was a child, and now actually they always are in my freezer.
Yeah.
because we went back to childhood of what brings us comfort, and I mean, I know that the alcoholic drink is for adults, but it's the same mentality. What can calm these frayed nerves? And so this might be a loaded question, but were the educators, what was happening at a higher level to sort of provide support for teachers? Or really was it every person for themselves? I think of the Titanic when people are trying to get in the lifeboat and some were drowning and some were jumping in the lifeboat. What was happening at that sort of state level for educators? Was there anything going on, to sort of provide some kind of, I don't know, just support, mental support?
Well, I do want to say that Candy and I have talked about this a lot, that people did the very best that they could with what they had at the time. This was new for everyone, obviously, and we would get some tips to relax, take a walk, do some mindfulness activities, but there was no time for that. Seriously, I felt like I couldn't even find a good show on TV. I wanted zero stimulation because we were just on what felt like all the time. And back to the nurture part, once we could get outside, I mean, I was outside. I was, my poor neighbors, I'd be like, hi, how are you? And they'd check on me, to make sure that I was still alive and kicking. But, it was so different that the comfort wasn't coming from people at the school, because we were all in that same, like,
Lifeboat.
What's the next step? And also what happened was the rules kept changing.
Yeah, there would be updates, from the state commissioner that got passed down to the superintendent, got passed down to us. And it was just like, I think they were trying to do the best they can as well. But we kind of were on our own.
It's kind of how it felt anyway, right? I mean, literally day to day. I mean, things were changing day to day. Nobody knew what was going on, including, our leaders our leaders of the country. But okay, we get the picture. It really, everybody was on survival mode.
Yeah.
Where I would like to move with this story is, the idea of when, I mean, none of us have lived through a global pandemic before. And really, I think that we all were riding on adrenaline and fear and anxiety. And people like teachers, you were really trying to keep the children buoyed. You were trying to keep the parents buoyed. So you were really trying to hold a lot of space for a lot of people for a long time. Here we are, 2023. Both of you have retired. And I'm imagining there's been some reflective time. And what I'd like to talk about now, because you both know, it's the idea that when we're cracked wide open, we discover our inner shine. And what can you give us some of your own learnings? Did it deepen your compassion? Did it slow you down? Did it motivate early retirement? Can you just talk to us about what have you discovered about who you are as a human being? How has it impacted or changed your life or your perspective? Please, who would like to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. I really learned that I was much more resilient and adaptive than I thought I could ever be. And I felt like I was tested every day. I also feel like the pandemic helped to distill in probably a lot of people what is the most important thing in life. And it is our relationships. And so I'm just even more grateful for the relationships that I do have, because that's what it's all about. And yes, you mentioned early retirement. I think, I learned, and I was very reflective during those times, that with the exhaustion, with the changes and demands I was seeing, in elementary education, I just felt in my heart that it was time for me, after 32 years, to turn the page and start a new chapter. And another piece to that was that we had just learned we were going to be grandparents, and they're close by. So all of it lined up, and I do believe it lines up for a reason. And I'm very proud of the teacher I was. I felt it was so much a part of my identity. I was very passionate. I gave it my all. But in life, it's time to start a new chapter. So that's what I did.
Thanks, Candy. Julie?
In the words of Glennon Doyle and many others, I learned that I could do hard things. And I now do positive self-talk, whereas before, what's the matter? You can't do technology. It's a thing. You can master this. And so I reached the point where I knew that financially I could make the leap to retirement and pursue my passion of floral design, gardening, and landscape, and that I would be able to move away from the teacher schedule of going to see my grandchildren in North Carolina, my daughter and son-in-law there, and I could go to see my family up north. And it really opened up a whole life that I guess I didn't realize would be so wonderful. But my very wise mother always talked about you have to have the valleys to know and enjoy the peaks in life. And the valley was low, and the peak is so unbelievable. And Candy and I were talking about, I wonder if it would have felt this great if I hadn't had those last 3 years that were oh so difficult.
I don't think so. I think that, we hear so much about attitude of gratitude, and you got to be grateful. And I think that what we don't often think about, it's easy to be grateful for good stuff, right? It's easy to be grateful for the good stuff. And, when I have conversations with people, that it's equally important to be grateful for the hard stuff, because that hard stuff is our growth, that's our growth. And both of you know I started this podcast because of my, after my brother died. And whenever I think about, well, it's impossible for me to be grateful that my brother is dead. But what I am so deeply grateful for is the courage to delve so wholeheartedly into the grief, because in that darkness is where I really did discover my inner light, my deeper purpose, and how beautiful faith and hope really is. And I think it's only when we kiss the bottom of that well can we really feel the magnitude of the shine on our face when we break through that to the light again. I mean, and so that idea of being grateful for the experience of pain sounds counterintuitive, but it's imperative, I think, to that deep soul growth and gratitude of the gift of this life, because everything is temporary. The good things are temporary and the horrific things are temporary. And our center, right, that's what keeps us centered, so that we're not all over the place when either one of those things happen. So going to the idea, I've got 2 questions that I gave to both of you to wrap up this interview. Often when we go through the really hard stuff, the idea of self-love changes and our notion of what that means. What did self-love mean to you before this event? And what does it mean to you now? Perhaps it hasn't changed, and that's fine, but I would be interested to hear your perspective on that question.
I thought self-love before was
A nice Cosmo.
was a delicious Cosmo, and let me just say that I only had one a night, maybe. No, but self-love to me was just doing tiny things that would bring me a bit of joy. And now self-love is large, and I'm singing and dancing and playing the piano again and reading, spending time with my friends and my family. And I got a new puppy. That's self-love.
Yeah.
Although my older dog doesn't think so. So finding that I can self-love longer and harder
I love that,
than
Julie.
before.
Thank you. Andy.
I think I've always felt that self-love is just really taking care of myself, my body, my mind, my spirit, and doing those things that bring me joy, and spending time with people that I cherish and who really see my heart. And I think it's been magnetized probably more, since the pandemic. And when you just realize it is those awesome relationships.
Yeah, and I think, listening to the two of you, the image that comes to mind is, the old cliche of stopping and smelling the roses. But for me, it's 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 paying attention to even the beauty of the petals, right? I mean, I think it sweetens just the tiny little things that bring us joy in this life. Someone had talked about noticing at a glance the length of his baby's eyelashes. I mean, it's just so beautiful, right? Because it is these small things that make up the moments of joy in our life. I right now feel so swelled with joy being with the two of you and having this conversation. And so my favorite question now has become, you're going to finish this sentence for me. Hope is, Candy, you start.
Yeah, I believe that hope is simply a belief that the universe is going to lead us in a positive way.
Thank you. Julie?
For me, hope is knowing that after a very difficult challenge or challenges, that there can be such immense joy and peace after.
Now, speaking of technology, if any of our listeners would like to find you, Candy, are you guys on Instagram?
Are you kidding?
Okay, I didn't think so.
Let's put it this way, dear friend Susan, that they can reach out to you and you'll text us. We've got our notes written like this.
All right, so you can't find Julie and you can't find Candy, but you are welcome to email me, leapwithsusan@gmail.com. They are not on social media, which is kind of perfect. Email me if you would like to ask them any questions. Is there anything else, though, truly, that you guys would like to say at all that I did not ask?
I would like to say that I really think the children will be fine. We did the very best we could, all of us, with what we had. And they are more resilient than us. And if we can find the goodness and the greatness after, I think that we'll all be good.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you, Susan, for inviting us to share our perspective with what life was like for we teachers in the trenches, and just commend you for all the work that you are doing and sharing your gifts with us all.
Thanks, guys.
Love you.
Yeah. I love the two of you so much. Thank you for giving your heart and soul to so many young kids for so many years. And I want to thank my listeners for tuning in. I hope that you have taken a nugget from today's conversation and that it helps you on your own journey. I love you all. Bye for now.